More on Australia's economy with Hans Hendrischke. He is a professor of Chinese business and management at the University of Sydney Business School. Hans, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Michelle.
Hans, the Reserve Bank of Australia, as we mentioned, has left the official cash rate on hold, a historic low of 1.5%. Now, there are concerns that rates are becoming ineffective at spurring growth whilst causing a overheating in the housing market. What's your take?
Yes, there's a very deep concern, and there are political debates around that. What you just covered, the question of negative gearing is one of the big issues that are discussed between government and opposition at the moment. But there's no clear solution in sight because there are vested interests on both sides. So this is a dilemma which is probably going to last. It has lasted for a long time already.
Well, even with the rate cut in August, the Aussie dollar remains stubbornly strong. Why?
Well, the Aussie dollar has been, the Reserve Bank has been trying to stabilise the Aussie dollar and bring it down from levels that were very high 2 years ago. It fluctuates at the moment on a very small band in response to the interest rate policies, but overall at the moment the situation doesn't seem to change, and there doesn't seem to be any reason that would indicate that the change is on the books.
Well, that high Aussie dollar impacting trade. And speaking of trade, Hans, Australia and Britain have been discussing a free trade deal during the G20. Prime Minister Turnbull said he would negotiate a, quote, very strong free trade agreement. What are your expectations on that front?
Well, that is one of the advantages of having summit meetings, that leaders can get together. And I think that was a statement which was very welcome here, probably also very welcome in the UK. In substance, however, the UK is our 7th largest trading partner in both-way trade. We are their number 20 for imports and their number 36 for exports. So the substance is not very large. And before we come to a free trade agreement with the UK, there's one with Indonesia and one with the European Union on the books. So these are commercial priorities, but the signal of having this trade agreement coming up at some time with the UK was strongly welcomed and has had a very positive effect.
All right, well, let's move on to what's going on with China, because Australia and China have had some tension recently after the Australian government stopped the sale of the country's biggest energy grid to Chinese bidders for security concerns. Hans, how much of a concern is this? How big of an issue is it? Is it a once-off situation, or is protectionism a real problem here?
Well, protectionism is one issue because the new government that we have since more than about a month relies on one vote for their majority in Parliament. So they have to move very carefully. On their opposition side, they have a group of people who are quite strong on protectionism. So they have to keep a balance, and they have to make political compromises in order to do that. The specific case with Ausgrid was something where the government had actually indicated that it was happy with having one Chinese bidder and one Hong Kong bidder. And then just before a decision was going to be made, they went back on this and said that, in fact, both bidders were not acceptable, without that ever being really carefully and properly explained. And that was one of the issues that Malcolm Turnbull, our Prime Minister, had to take to China. He had an opportunity to explain that and to give his view to Chinese President Xi Jinping. And the outcome of that meeting was that both sides said they understood and respected each other's position. So what would have happened in the background is that Malcolm Turnbull was able to explain that this was not an issue of protectionism, but most likely a much more technical issue, and that it shouldn't be seen as a signal that Australia is moving away from engagement internationally and with China specifically.
Well, do you think China was satisfied with that answer, with that explanation? President Xi saying on the sidelines of the G20 that China hopes the Australian side continues to dedicate itself to providing foreign investors a fair, transparent, and predictable policy environment. So with that statement in mind, how could that impact relations going forward?
Well, that refers to this specific case where there was clearly a lack of transparency, where the bidders were surprised, where they were not prepared for that because they never had any indication, and where possibly they could argue that they suffered some reputational damage by suddenly being depicted as national security risks. So I think there was a point, and there was certainly a need for our Prime Minister to explain his position in this meeting with Xi Jinping.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Hans Hendrischke, Professor of Chinese Business and Management at the University of Sydney Business School.